Muhammad said, we are living in the day of judgment. This is what is producing the anger of the nations and the wrath of God. This is the time that those who have been deprived of justice must receive justice. For it is only our acting on the principle of justice that will ease the anger of the nations and take away the wrath of God. There can be no justice without truth, and there can be no peace in the world without justice. As a nation, America is blessed with wealth, wisdom, science, technology, and abundance. America is also blessed with the awesome power to destroy nations of people. In order for you and America to receive the greatest of God's blessings, which is the longevity and perpetuity that former great nations and empires have not enjoyed, you, Mr. President, must rule according to the will and the way of Allah God. Mr. President, you and this nation stand in the position of the vicegerent of God. This means the person or nation that rules the earth in the place of God. This is why America must rule the world as God himself would rule, for America is now standing in God's place by his permission. Allah God also has awesome power to destroy. He is called the possessor of power over all things, and he is called the destroyer, the avenger. However, none of these attributes are his principal attributes. All of his attributes of might and power to avenge and destroy are balanced by his major attributes, which are beneficence, mercy, the nurturer of all things, making them attain stage after stage until they reach perfection, or the king or judge who judges with justice. These are the four greatest attributes of Allah. If America is to be truly triumphant in this hour, these four great attributes must give balance and direction to America's awesome power to destroy and her desire to avenge the horrible act of September the 11th. When I heard you say that this act against America on September the 11th has given purpose to your administration, and that you feel that it is your mission to destroy the terrorists, their networks, those who harbor them, and that the awesome power of America will be used toward this end. And this, you said you hope, will be the legacy that you leave to future generations. You also hope that the children and the American people will live without the fear of such evil as we experienced on September the 11th. However, within these statements are my reasons for deep concern. You have risen to the challenge of this hour, and this hour has given you the support of the American people and the support of most of the nations of the earth. In my humble judgment, what you see as the purpose of your administration must not hinder or blind you from seeing the possibility of an even greater purpose and potential legacy. It is out of this desire to see you fulfill that which will give you the greatest legacy that I write to you as a humble servant, appealing to a great and powerful nation and ruler. I respectfully say to you that I believe if you continue this effort in the way that you presently have in mind, it will not end terrorism, but unfortunately will increase it. On September the 17th, 1985, I had a vision-like experience where I was told of the secret plan of President Ronald Reagan, who had met with his Joint Chiefs of Staff to plan a war. I was not told who the war was against, but within a few months it became clear to me that the war was against Libya and its leader, Muammar Gaddafi. President Reagan, on coming into office, had as one of his chief aims the desire to get rid of Muammar Gaddafi and to place in the leadership of Libya a regime more favorable to America's foreign policy interests. The desire of President Reagan also concerned the planning of a war involving young black men here on the soil of America. This is what inspired me to tour this country, talking to black men, urging them to stop the killing of one another. And this is what eventually led to the Million Man March on October the 16th, 1995. Another of President Reagan's desires was to make null and void the treaty that was signed by his predecessor, Jimmy Carter, returning the Panama Canal to the Panamanian people by the year 2000. President Manuel Noriega of Panama was demonized by the American press, tried in absentia, and found guilty of drug dealing. This was used as the justification for a violent action that was taken against Panama using the armed forces of America. However, the real aim was to place in Panama a government of America's choosing and to nullify the treaty signed by President Carter that gave the Panama Canal back to the Panamanian people. During President Reagan's administration, Muammar Gaddafi was demonized in the American press. The bombing of a discotheque in Germany was used by President Reagan to justify the most expensive assassination attempt in the history of this nation. I need not bore you with the details of this because you have access to information that will verify the truth of what I am writing. But I am writing this to show a consistent pattern of behavior of America's presidents, administrations, and the press with respect to those Muslim leaders and other leaders that America has chosen to denounce as rogues and to use as a justification for military action to cover their real purposes. President Richard Nixon wrote that the enemy of democracy was not communism, but fundamentalist Islam. Since the Nixon-Ford administration, every president has taken some military action against a Muslim nation. President Jimmy Carter felt that the overthrow of the Shah of Iran, Mohammad Reza Pahlavi, and his replacement with the Islamist regime of Ayatollah Khomeini was a threat to America's vital interests. So Saddam Hussein was given $80 billion with America's approval by the Saudi government and the rulers of the United Arab Emirates to make Saddam Hussein a strong military power, to use him against the rise of the so-called fundamentalist regime in Iran. During President Carter's administration, the American embassy in Iran was taken and the hostage crisis began. The effort of Jimmy Carter to free the hostages through military action after the fall of the Shah of Iran was a failure. In the negotiations between our government and the government of Imam Khomeini, it was agreed that the hostages would be released, but not during the administration of President Carter. The hostages were released in the early days of President Reagan's administration. President Reagan also saw Imam Khomeini and his desire that the Iranian people return to the purity of the faith of Islam as a threat to America's vital interests in that area of the world. Your father fulfilled President Reagan's desire concerning the Panama Canal. Your father also had a problem that involved Saddam Hussein and Iraq. At the same time that he was prosecuting the war against Saddam Hussein, a part of that conflict also involved young black men in America, gangs, and drugs. Although the Gulf War was won by the Allied forces, Saddam Hussein remains in power and has become a fixation with every succeeding president. Mr. President, you have now inherited that which Presidents Reagan, Carter, your father, and President Clinton were not able to complete. What I have been shown in my vision-like experience is that you have decided to fulfill their unrealized expectations. Afghanistan is only a preliminary to a much wider war, which is already planned. Now, mind you, God showed me this long before you all came to know that this was a reality. Should you persist in this, you will do what no Islamic leader is able to do. No leader of any Muslim nation can call for jihad or holy war and cause the Muslim world to obey that call. The only one who can call for such is one who sits in the position of Khalifa or successor of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. Since the destruction of the Caliphate of Islam by corruption within the ranks of Islam and European machinations, the rise of nationalism among Muslim nations has made it difficult and nearly impossible to unify the Arab and Muslim world on the question of jihad. However, Mr. President, if you follow what you have in your mind, which many of those around you are encouraging you to do, then you will do what Osama bin Laden and no Muslim extremist could ever do. You will unite the Muslim world in hostility against America and Great Britain, and you will use your great position of power inadvertently to call for a holy war against the West. You will force the more moderate Islamic regimes either not to side with you or to side with you at the risk of being overthrown